I'm excited to be here with Wayne Simmons, who is the Global Customer Excellence Leader at Pfizer and also the author of the recently published Customer Excellence Enterprise book, and a real incredible thought leader that we're honored to hear from today about the focus of on customer and how it impacts growth. So let's start, Wayne, with your thoughts on what do customer leaders really need to be thinking about and focused on when it comes to impacting growth for their organizations?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for having me. So I think about growth and customer experience and brand all together. So those things are interconnected, and I believe leaders should be focused on bringing those three different domains together. So brand is how you show up in the world, and customer experience is really how customers interact with you, how they see you, their perceptions of you. So those things are usually typically done in three different domains. But I think bringing them together is what leaders should be thinking about.
Why is customer focus so important for strategy leaders and ultimately for the CEOs and leadership teams that own strategy for their organizations?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, and it's really a behavior thing for me. I think companies think about customer acquisition. They really spend a lot of time and energy on acquiring new customers. And I think once that investment is made, they seem to forget about how to retain them. So I think bringing those two things together is really where the growth flywheel comes into play, and trying to get leaders to think about so not just acquisition, but retention and expansion over the long haul.
That's awesome. And you've worked in a lot of different industries. You're currently in the pharma industry, but you've worked in other industries, hospitality, professional services. Have you seen differences across the industries you've worked in when it's come to customer focus, what matters, how to keep it front and center for leadership?
Yeah, I think every industry has their own dynamic going on, and they are fairly unique in many respects. In pharma, it's a very, very unique, very complex ecosystem of customers. So I think every company and every industry needs to kind of craft their own version or interpretation of CX and marketing, go to market, and that fits their business. I think companies tend to get locked into orthodoxy, and it sort of may not fit their environment, but they actually are missing the opportunity to kind of shape it for their own environment, their own context.
You've been in a lot of large organizations, really driving and leading customer experience. What have you found to be the biggest barriers or challenges to getting, what needs to get done in these large, complex organizations?
Yeah, so it's probably not a surprise to you, but the technology is pretty straightforward. The processes can be pretty straightforward, but the people part of it is really the challenge. And that's from a leadership perspective, and actually scaling out the idea and the belief in customer experience as a driver of growth. So that's really the challenge. And that's what I'd like to focus my energy on, is just driving that people and that culture and the belief and the conviction that CX is a driver of growth.
Any other things you'd want to share with our Outthinker audience? Things to keep in mind, opportunity areas, focus areas for them?
Yeah, so a big theme that I've been grappling with is this idea of like two-dimensional business versus three-dimensional business, and I'll explain that. So the two-dimensional business is like companies show up and they market and they express their brands through the brand factors and product factors, and we're kind of used to that condition. So our marketing messaging, our advertising, our programming is built around brand and product, features and functions. So what's missing in my world is the customer experience, and how critically important that is to expressing the brand, but how customers make decisions. So if we tie together, how customers are choosing and selecting companies based on product, based on brand and experience, it will really change how you go to market and really change how you show up in the world.
Where are big organizations or enterprises getting stuck when it comes to that? Where are they breaking through, and what are the challenges they're seeing?
Yeah, some things are very consistent over the years, and it's as usual, it's the silos. So companies get stuck in silos, whether they're functional silos of marketing, sales, and experience in different silos. But and I think that's the big breakthrough opportunities, to try to get horizontal rather than vertical. So if you can break down those silos and go to market as one integrated company, one holistic story and experience, that's where I think companies can win. Customer acquisition is fun. I mean, it's that's where marketing comes into play. That's where sales comes into play, and programming and activation, and getting those new customers is always a energizing thing. But the hard work comes in my view, when you have to retain them. And so, kind of creating that, going from the funnel model to the bow tie model is kind of how we describe it, where we're linking together customer acquisition with customer retention and really tie those two things together into one integrated operating model. And that's where you can really get some scale in terms of growth, like not only capturing customers, but maintaining it and you know uh, retaining them as well over the long haul.
How do
Yeah.
you keep a more consistent focus on the customer experience within their enterprise in an enduring way?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question and a fundamental question. And I think it, as always, it starts with leadership conviction. So leadership intent is one thing. The intent seems to always be there, but the conviction, like the real belief that customers are at the center of the business, is where it all starts and oftentimes ends. And I think that what we advocate in the book is that you have to make structural and systemic changes to your environment. You can't, tool your way or technology your way out of it. You really have to be structurally and systemically predisposed to deliver to customers to make it consistent. And some of the brands that are out there, the Rich Carlsons of the world that are long time brands that have scaled, be customer centric across their enterprise over the years, have done that systemically. So they look different than a normal company. They're wired differently and they're set up differently. The cultures look very different. So it's not a superficial thing. It has to be done at the very DNA level of the company. How do you do that is it's a sort of natural question. And I think it's things like having the board of directors involved and having a board committee associated with the customer and customer experience. How are we doing? There's a lot of opportunity and risk inherent in that experience. So why isn't the board of directors sort of overseeing and governing from that perspective? So things like that show up in these companies that are really winning.
Excellent. I'm a huge believer in that. And I totally agree with you there. And hopefully, we're getting a movement of more boards thinking about this as more
Yeah.
people with customer backgrounds are getting onto boards and influencing boards. And board members and leaders are recognizing the role that customers play in core, both governance, growth, and even understanding risks. So,
Yeah, that could be a great sort of leading indicator of how customer-centric companies are. Is do they have a board committee set up around the customer? Would be a great thing to measure. And how many mentions of the customer and customer experience are in their sort of quarterly reports. So in 10Ks. So there are ways for us to evaluate progress.
if the board is demanding customer focus, then that'll be more of an enduring thing. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the biggest opportunities out there because it's very untapped. And I think if you come at it from a risk perspective and a governance perspective and so fiduciary perspective, that's where you can make some real inroads. Like this is your customer. You value your company is at risk, based on customer loss and churn. So, make that a high priority on the board agenda.